Whenever I speak to somebody about Africa and I say about the three sort of sectors that are really going to drive the continent in the future, I mean, apart from the emerging middle class and spending, etc., it's three things. It's usually telecommunications, agriculture and infrastructure. Now, the DBSA and the IDC are to co-host a Pan-African Capacity Building Seminar. In the studio in Johannesburg now is Brian Figaji, who's the chairperson of another acronym now, let me get this straight, PACBP, the Pan-African Capacity Building Program. Brian, thanks very much for joining us. Tell us about the purpose of the seminar, first of all.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. The seminar is actually bringing together of three groups of students from across Africa. We've launched a master's program in infrastructure management. It's really focused at maintenance of infrastructure, public infrastructure. So we have a master's program running in Uganda, in Senegal, and at the University of Pretoria. And this seminar is bringing these three groups of students together so that we can talk to each other across the continent and across countries about infrastructure. And this is their field visit, so it's a part of the master's program that they're spending in South Africa, and they're going to look at some of the big projects in South Africa.
But also, I think from what I've read from your press release is it's really going to address a skills shortage in infrastructure and infrastructure development, not only in South Africa, but on a Pan-African basis. And from what I see, for example, the hydroelectric power project that is being mooted in the DRC, it's all very well identifying a project and getting the funding, but if you haven't got the skills, then it's a non-starter.
Yes, I do want to make a distinction though, because this morning we were also talking to a few people, and there seems to be a focus on the infrastructure creation. Our program is about public infrastructure maintenance and looking after it and saying to people, don't build it if you can't maintain it. And so what we've done is we've introduced a master's program on infrastructure management, focused on the maintenance, the planning, looking at the life cycle of the infrastructure. And this is the first cohort of students. And the students on this program are all people who are currently already employed by local authorities across the continent.
Is there enough education, is there a sufficient education infrastructure throughout the continent that is developing the sort of people that are getting together that you've just described in order, to grow future generations of infrastructure maintainers, if you like?
Well, that's what we are, that's the whole object of the exercise. So we have 3 universities and we've launched this project. We're now working together to establish a more permanent master's program that will be focusing on infrastructure maintenance and management. And we hope to make this master's program available to universities across the continent.
Is it the case that there might be, as you've just said earlier on, you might say, let's identify a project, but don't build it unless you can maintain it? Would that be a deal breaker? Because let's say that you flew in a load of people from overseas and then put up an infrastructure project, and then they all ran away, and it essentially would be mothballed in 10 years' time. It sounds like an extreme case, but that's almost what you were suggesting.
Unfortunately, there are quite a few examples of those in Africa. And we don't have to go far. There are a few of them in South Africa. So we're hoping that these people, and we're talking local authority and utilities at the moment. So we're not talking about major issues, but we're talking about local authorities. And we're trying to suggest to people that when you're planning a new bit of infrastructure, consider the maintenance, consider what you have to do with that piece of infrastructure in the next 20 years. And if you have that planned, then that's part of establishing and creating the infrastructure. Too often we build it and then we worry about how we're going to maintain it once it's there. That's too late.
And too often, of course, we train our people up in Africa and they get a better deal elsewhere. They flee our shores and go somewhere like China or Germany or the United States of America, Canada, Australia. It's an all too familiar tale, Brian.
Yes, unfortunately, that's true. But what we have now is we are drawing people from local authorities, from utilities, And that's why we've sandwiched, it's a sandwiched master's program. And so they are already employed, and so we're building the capacity at those institutions currently. I think the next intake we will probably also be able to draw people from the local authorities. It may be later on that we will be training people who are not necessarily in the local authorities, and then you probably have the flight risk. Well, we may have the flight risk now as well, but that's a chance you've got to take.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so you're sitting down at the seminar. What's going to be the program? What's going to be the process? It's being conducted in 3 different centres. Tell us how it's going to work.
The academic program is conducted at Makerere at the University of Dakar in Senegal and at the University of Pretoria. This week is a field visit. It's the only opportunity where we can bring all these students together. We have a few objectives with this. The one is to expose them to infrastructure and to infrastructure maintenance plans. So they're going to be visiting water utilities, the Gautrain, the Kusile power plants, so Eskom is involved. But for us, it's also important that we get the students to talk to each other. Too often, people in Africa talk to Europe. We're trying to get Africa to talk to Africa. And so we're hoping to build a network of municipal or infrastructure people in Africa who are able to communicate and call each other and talk to each other about what their problems are. So there's a French component and there's an English component, and the field visit is being dealt with in dual language. So we have translators all over the place, and we have 93 students here, 25 from Pretoria, and the balance from Uganda and Senegal. And of course, they're drawn from a whole host of countries. There are probably about 10 African countries in the group.
Well, hopefully next year it won't be 93, it'll be 193, because another problem that you have is that the people that have the intellectual capacity to be in this seminar are also, there's a lot of competition with other professions. Some might want to be a lawyer, some might want to go into financial services, others into broadcasting, heaven forbid. So you do have a sort of a selling job to do as well.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. There's mobility. Actually, I'm very happy if there's mobility as long as it's on the African continent. And you can't prevent mobility. So we need to make sure that the institutions that have to deliver services to our communities are capacitated to do that. And we must create the right environment for people to stay. So this is our first phase. And we, as I said before, we're drawing people out of the institutions at the moment and capacitating them to do the job that they're doing even better than they're doing it currently.